Hello and welcome to another edition of the Moving Iron Podcast. This podcast is proudly provided by Axon, helping dealers move more iron for almost 100 years. Find out more at axontire.com. Axon was started almost 100 years ago out of a passion for keeping agriculture moving. It's that same passion that drives them today. With a vision for a better experience for both farmer and dealer, they set out to create a better way to move more iron. When you partner with Axon, you get immediate access to a full range of products and solutions designed to meet the complex needs of today's grower. Axon carries all major brands and sizes of tires, wheels, and tracks. From custom colors and sizes to fully customized wheels, you can have the solution for virtually any problem today's farmer is trying to solve. To find more or become an Axon dealer, please visit axontire.com. This podcast is also brought to you by Valley Transportation. Valley has over 33 years in the trucking business, moving ag and construction equipment across the country. For more information, go to valleytransinc.com or give Parker a call at 800-657-4910. At Valley Transportation, our goal is to help you reach yours.
Moving higher in the 21st century. Hard-working people working hard for you and me. Moving higher, time and time again. Through the years you'll find us here. Moving higher.
Hello and welcome to Moving Iron Podcast. This edition of the Moving Iron Podcast is brought to you by Tractor Zoom, where data meets diesel. I like that, dude. You guys should capture that into a nice little bow and keep that trademarked or something like that. Because that's a quality statement. I got Kyle McMahon with me here. Kyle he's the founder and CEO of Tractor Zoom, and he's a world of knowledge. He's got a great team over there. Those guys work tirelessly, trying to build the best product out there. And to be honest with you, I think they're doing a pretty damn good job of that. So Kyle, how you been, man?
Thanks for having me on, Casey. It's been a while. Things are really good here in Tractor Zoom. It's almost Christmas, and I think it's supposed to be 60 degrees on Christmas Eve. So this field work is still on the mind. But I keep watching the auction market and now the dealer market. Things are going well.
Yep. How's 21 been, man? Let's talk about that as a very macro level stuff here. So we came out of 2020, post-COVID shutdowns, all those kind of things, in and out, those kind of things. And then, for a minute, corn was almost free. And now we've rallied back around to where corn, I think the other day I looked at it, was almost over $6. Wheat's over $8. Soybeans are almost to 13. I mean, so we're getting back up there. But the tail end of that is the input cost story that we're seeing out there. So none of that of which has slowed any demand for equipment down in 20 and going into 22 at all. So I guess as you take kind of rewind back to 2021 and kind of look that over, what are some of your big takeaways for the year?
Yeah, I think we tracked over 3,000 auctions and a little over $2 billion of farm machinery sold at auction this year. And it's pretty funny to look back at just the conversations, and not just equipment, but agriculture in general. At the end of 2020, beginning of 21, it was all about high commodity prices. How high can we get? Let's look at all this profitability. And then we saw input prices and cost of production starting to rise in the middle of this year. And now it's all about supply and demand. And I think we're starting to hear more about renewable diesel and how that's the new ethanol boom. So we're back to our optimistic ways, I guess, as farmers. But through the auctions this year, we've seen inventory down and prices dramatically higher, and that's obviously a combination of high net farm income, bigger yields than we probably expected in 21. And then now we're going into the end of the year. People have started to realize, just talking to the accountants out there, farmers are obviously starting the conversation of wanting to upgrade equipment, take advantage of bonus depreciation and tax incentives by the end of the year. In December alone, I know I'm getting a little ahead of us from a 2021 perspective. In December alone, row crop tractor prices have been up 36% from December 2020 to December 2021, in the month of December, those machines selling. So comparing December to December, row crop tractor prices are up 36%. Question we always ask is, okay, that's wild. What is the quality difference? It was an average of 2,900 hours in both of those months. So the usage on those machines is the same. So we're seeing some pretty crazy prices. And in supply in the month of December was down 46%. So naturally, we're seeing a lot fewer machines come to auction and much higher prices being paid.
Yeah, that's the thing right now. If you can, the 36% makes a lot of sense, because if it's available now for sale, there's a lot of stuff that's available in June, July, those kind of time frames. But if it's delivered, if you have a reason to buy something now for a tax-driven reason, you're going to have to pay more for it, because you have a very, very small, bag to sell out of, especially in December. You know what I mean? Yeah. I've always said, I thought between November, December of 21 and January, February of 2022 will be your two best times to sell a piece of equipment. If you're in the market to do that, because quite frankly, if you still have something readily available in those time frames, either it's a tax reason thing or it's a deferred comp thing going over to the first year, and you guys are getting ready for playing season and looking at what they're going to need for early spring harvest. And if you have it available, it's going to be worth a lot more for sure.
Yeah. And what I think is unique. So as we look at, let's just say tractors, okay, that price is dramatically higher. You also have to think about just overall inflation. And as we start to look at new machines coming to market, you know this better than I do, how much higher price new machines are going into 22 than they were in 21. So that's also helping drive that market. Net farm income is one thing, but I'd say holistically from 2020 to 2021, what we've seen is low supply and high demand. The one interesting asset class or type of machine is that surprised us from a supply standpoint. It was the only category that the supply was higher this year than it was last year, which is self-propelled sprayers. And we see that as kind of a nice to have machine, not always a need to have. But in good commodity times, farmers are realizing the ROI and the benefit of having their own application equipment and applying chemical more times throughout the year and less reliant on the co-op or a custom application individual doing that. So that is also one of the hotter categories, and supply's even been up. So it's hard to say that supply is the only issue that's happened in 2021, and that'll be really interesting to see how this plays out into 2022.
Yep. So you're talking about sprayers there, and that's an interesting point. Do you know off the top of your head what the difference in, like you talked about combines being 2,900 hours worth of use? Is it the same on the sprayers? Were they hour-wise? Were they pretty close to each other?
I don't have that stat right in front of me. I'd have to go to our data team to pull that. But what we saw 307 sprayers from January to the end of November come to the market this year, and only 275 come to the market last year. And self-propelled sprayers, and these are higher quality sprayers, $25,000 and above, and under 5,000 hours. And the price premium this year was 10% higher than it was last year.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. So I just look at some of these sprayers that we're looking at now, and the hours seem higher just because they've ran them longer and they've done a few more things to them than we've seen in the past. So that is definitely a market that is very fickle, just like you said. It's nice to have, not necessarily a must on the farm. But when you look at like four-wheel drive tractors, what are you guys seeing there as far as that goes?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be similar to row crop tractors. Mm-hmm. When we talk about row crop tractors, we define that as MFWDs. But four-wheel drive, there's obviously more demand. Supply hasn't changed. It's one of the more flatline asset categories out there. Prices are up about 9% through November. And so into December is actually going to be a little bit higher, probably about that 12, 13%. What we're really starting to notice is the difference of four-wheel drive tractor from 2009. People are willing to pay much more for modern technology and a four-wheel drive. So that price difference on that higher end, newer machine is dramatically higher.
Are you seeing more when you look at like track machines like that? It seems like there's a little more interest nationwide in either a 2-track or a quad-track, 4-track type of machine. Are you seeing more where those machines are holding their value higher than what you would expect as a cost of maybe when they were new or something like that, year over year depreciation scale?
Yeah, I don't have that stat right in front of me here to identify or to tell you with data the depreciation schedules, but that's something our software can start to look at to identify that.
Have you noticed more of those machines popping up in auctions?
Yes, a lot more.
Yeah.
But that also goes to sometimes it takes 3 years for a new machine to significantly hit the auction market. There's always those anomalies where it's a one-year-old machine or
right.
a 100-hour machine to come to auction, but to have some good comparable sales to build a data set and draw conclusions, sometimes it takes 3 years of that machine to be in the market before you can start to see a lot of that. But yeah, we started looking at some 9620RXs in November, and we did a study just looking at how much more people are willing to pay. And people were paying the same price. If you looked at 2020, the end of November of 2020 on a 9620RX, they were willing to pay the same amount then for a 300-hour machine this year at an 1,800-hour machine. So the same price is being paid for a 300-hour machine last year is what they're paying for an 1,800-hour machine this year.
And that kind of goes back to what's available.
Yes.
Yeah, that's exactly what's available. And so Aaron and I talked about that in a podcast not too long ago where we were talking about how those, the late model low hour segments and what those look like and how that scale was going to start to slide. And that, because of the lack of, 300-hour, 400-hour, 500-hour tractors, that scale was going to slide up to 750 or 1,000 or something like that. That was going to be your new kind of later model, low hour kind of approach to that. And that's the data that kind of proves that theory a little bit. You're looking at, and that's a big jump. Now that's 1,500 hours, but that's the same time, that's what's available.
Yeah, and that's a 2019 machine, right?
Right. Yeah.
And if somebody's putting that many hours on it in 1 year, you have to think that they've been run pretty hard over the last year or two to get to that hour rate.
Exactly right. When you
but I think you bring up a good point. I'm looking at data right now. I know we're switching topics, but over on the combine side, this kind of goes back to what you're talking about, where the hour of a machine, what you're used to buying, is going to have to increase if you want optionality. When we're looking at combines, the average separator hour for a combine this year compared to last was up 14%.
Okay. 14% from this time last year. Okay. So that means like holistically-ish somewhere in the neighborhood of about a 10% organic growth in that. But you throw inflation, yeah, okay. That's the thing too. When you start, like, how do you measure inflation on that? Like, where does that? What number are you using to manage? Is that 7% inflation that we hear people get tossed around out there? Because if that's true, then the actual price of a machine kept up with basically the price increase. You know what I mean? You factor out the inflation. So that's kind of the double-edged sword there a little bit.
Yeah. So the average separator average machine coming to market is at 14%. So if it was the average combine market last year was 1,000 sep hours, this year it's 1,140 hours. Right. So it's just aged inventory. So it goes along to exactly what you and Aaron were discussing.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I misunderstood what you said, but yeah, that's you're exactly right. That and they're still paying the same amount of money for it. And that's the crazy thing about that is that, again, crazy times that we're in, if it's available, it's worth 14 to 25% more just based on what you're telling me.
Yeah, well, in the same data set we're looking at, the prices are up 16% year over year on combines. Their older machines are more, they have more hours on them, and it's still up 16%. So if you start to look at that on a more parallel basis, that's actually up 22 to 24% year over year. Mm-hmm. So it's still a big price increase, but what does that look like from if you were going to market to buy a new machine?
Right.
Price increases are not quite that high, but
yeah, and I think that's the other thing too. So you start looking at, if I'm a guy coming to the market right now and I want to buy a brand new machine, or there's the 1-year-old machine that's available right now, you're starting to kind of cut hairs there a little bit. Like which one's the better deal? Like we get a new one, warranty and all the things that come along with that. And I'm the only one that's ever driven it, blah, 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 blah. But you have the 300-hour machine sitting out there right now, and you can go buy it. Which you're really buying you're not saving much money, I guess, if you go and buy the used one. It comes down to is how soon do you need it? Because if you want a new machine today, it's 23 before you get it. I don't care what manufacturer you are. Across the board, it's somewhere in that neighborhood. So I guess it comes down to how soon do you need it, and what are you willing to make that investment right now?
Yeah, new machines. Usually, if you look at a depreciation curve of new machines coming to market, naturally the steepest depreciation curve is right off the lot in the first 3 years, right? And that starts to level out because then you start to have some reconditioning costs, and you have to start investing in the machine. For those first few years, you don't. That depreciation schedule or that depreciation curve is starting to get screwed up, and because there's so much demand and so much cash out there willing to buy that 1-year-old machine, and they realize they price a new one, and they realize they got to take a year to 2 years to get that new machine. So they're willing to pay up, and they see the price of that. So they're willing to pay up for that 1-year-old used machine.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just weird. I mean, everything that you know about equipment right now is just kind of thrown out the window because none of it, every day it's a new day. There's no uncharted water. There's no pre-existing information out there that shows you this is what you should be doing in this time frame.
Yeah. And if you want to, in our opinion, obviously we're a data company, but you have to look at the data to start to see the trends. I mean, if you only looked at November on row crop tractor prices, November to November of 2020 to 2021, they're up 27%. Mm-hmm. But then you go into December, typically the biggest machinery buying month of the year, right? Now they're up 36%. So you had a 9% gain in 1 month.
Yeah.
And we sit back and say that's simply supply and people wanting to save some money on some taxes.
Yeah, and I don't think the supply thing really lightens up at all until you get to about this time next year, because I think most manufacturers are going to have late fourth quarter, late third quarter, early fourth quarter deliveries of a lot of new equipment. And there's going to be a surge of equipment that hits the market, in my opinion. And I think he might see something there, but that stuff is going to get gobbled up just as fast as anything else has been, because in a lot of cases, most of that stuff's already pre-sold. They're just waiting for the new piece to get delivered. So let me bounce this off you. Podcast or two ago, Aaron and I made a prediction that we wouldn't see another inventory issue till 2030, right? So we're at 2022 now. And the reason I said that is because we have 3 years of this kind of high demand, low supply kind of thing. And the cabinet really never gets full, right? So whenever we might, you have 9, you sell 8, you get, 9 more come in, you sell 8. So you got 2 kind of hanging around, whatever else. Kind of keep pushing way through that. And then you start to see this kind of pile up into 20, our inventory start to grow anyway, between 25, 26, and 27. 27, we're having similar conversations to what we had in 2012 because, times are good. We got a lot of stuff flying off the shelf. Things are great. Selling a lot of new, but the used, we're selling into a big backlog of used equipment. And it's 28, 29 when we're sitting back going like, oh, I think we feel like we got a little bit of an issue here. 2030 is kind of 2014 all over again. Have you guys looked at anything like that as a predictor of kind of past data that you have going through that time frame and done some futuristic projections of where you think inventories might look like?
We haven't, from a data science perspective, really analyzed that far out. So what I'm going to say is my personal opinion and just me reading the market with all the data, I guess, I have in my head. But I could see that. I think the demand is going to continue to be there. It's not necessarily, there's a lot of cash in farmers' pockets from this year.
Sure.
I saw my net farm income this year and, really shocked me in a good way. So I think that's going to continue into 2022. And as you start to look at 24, 25, 26, it's going to be a whole different geopolitical scheme. It's going to be a whole different market. I believe that OEMs will figure out how to supply the market. We will get supply back. I think dealers have done a really good, dealers learned back in 13, 14, what high inventories do to your profit and your bottom margin. So I don't think dealers will oversupply themselves based on what they learned in 2014. But then the next thing that I keep hearing about is renewable diesel, right? We just saw the aircraft fuel.
Right.
So we keep talking to economists and they start talking about how that renewable diesel and all these soy processing plants that are going up could be the next ethanol boom, and ethanol kind of take a back seat. So that just tells me a lot more demand, prosperity for farmers, and more willingness to buy newer, nicer, better machines to capture a lot of that profit. Because I think what farmers have learned historically is if I invest in better technology, I can get a better ROI, not necessarily a bigger yield, but a better ROI. So you guys are the inventory experts. We're always looking at the world from a rear view perspective. We haven't put the prescriptions in place to look at a forward-looking basis too hard, but that's how I look at it.
Mm-hmm. I think there's two things out there that'll really change the way inventory is on the lot and the way it looks too. One is there's going to be a mass number of farmers that retire over the next 3 years. I fully believe that. I feel like some guys were going to retire in 12, 13, 14 and held out for one more year, and that 1 year kind of caught them and they had to kind of ride it out to get that equity back. And I think you're going to have their equity back in 3 years. And I think there's those 65 to 75-year-old farmers that are going to go. They're going to go away. They're going to retire. Big bulk of those guys don't have anyone coming back to the farm to operate anything when they come back. So I think, obviously the farmers are going to get bigger. A lot of capital is going to flow into agriculture too. Just trying to find the right guy that might be the right farmer, but he's just, he or she's just not capital rich, and there could be some money that comes in that could drive that. And you start seeing some 3,000 and 4,000 acre farmers going to, 10 and 15, 20,000 acre farmers just because of that. But I think that the retirement of guys going out and then whatever happens with the autonomous vehicle side of it too is going to be a big deal, because I truly believe that once autonomous vehicles come into play and they're there, and you've kind of offset the operator, and there's not that many operators out there anymore operating equipment, and there's more just machines out there driving themselves, that there's not going to be a lot of a lot of features that are in machines now that are kind of a creature featured thing, that are the additional, like, massaging seat and all these kind of things. All that kind of stuff is going to go to the wayside. It's going to be more focused on the technology side of it. It's going to be way more driven by how fast can it drive itself, and how often you have to recharge it, and what does the support equipment look like, and blah, 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 blah. The faster that ramps up, that changes the direction of, I think, used inventory for the simple fact of, if I'm an operator, if I'm a farmer now, I don't need to have a big leap in my equipment year over year, because at that point it's kind of like a laptop computer. I mean, you get a laptop, you run it for 4 or 5 years, and then all of a sudden it's so slow and outdated that you can't keep up with it, and then you go get a new one. I really think you're going to see similar technology. That's going to play a big factor in that. And on top of that too, we're talking 8 years from now, and you see what over the past 8 years, what technology has done. Could you imagine what the next 8 is going to look like? If you start factoring all those things into play, and what does that whole thing look like? When does the subscription model start to come into used equipment, if I'm a farmer and I can, the machinery link aspect of this thing, I mean, they were just 20 years ahead of their time. That's really kind of what it comes down to. And you start factoring that in there, you have a wave of freaking drones that start in Texas and work their way north. It's like a swarm of locusts coming across the countryside, and all of a sudden I just need my thing here to plant between these days and keep on keeping on from there. I think that's another factor that really starts playing into this whole scheme of what's used equipment look like over the next 10 years. If that stuff starts to happen, then I don't think used equipment is the question that we're having. The question we're having is who we're going to sell it to, because there's not going to be enough people, enough bodies to actually use the equipment as it comes out.
I couldn't agree more with a lot of what you said, and I was starting to write some notes here as you're mentioning a lot of that. You're already starting to see farming go from the progressive farmers. I'm willing to go operate my equipment, and they're more or less operating a business, right? They have risk management and they're making investment decisions. That's simply where it's going. And I think I have a unique perspective just on the technology side as we analyze the market, and we're always watching what's happening. So venture capital is investors investing in companies and new technology that are bullish on forward-looking industry trends. And in 2016, there was $700 million of venture capital invested in ag technology in the United States. This year, it is projected to hit $7 billion. So agriculture is kind of that next wave of compounding technology growth, where I couldn't agree with you more that how fast technology is going, that 2-year-old technology right now is new technology. Right. But 5-year-old technologies, it's getting kind of old. In 10 years from now, 2-year-old technology will be too old to be operated, because of how fast technology is compounding and the ROI that farmers as the consumer will see. It's funny to bring this up. I was scrolling through, I don't know, a social platform. I'm probably on too many of them. And there was a individual that screenshotted his text from some economist saying 21 years ago that the internet is just a fad.
Right. Yeah, I've talked. You know how many people I talked to in that time frame that thought that. So younger generations more willing to embrace technology, and they're going to be making investment decisions on technology to scale their operation. Yeah, I had this conversation the other day that we start looking at Gen 1 technology. Some of this technology is coming out now. I mean, you look at like seed sprayer, for example. That's probably the easiest one to point at. Deere's making claims of up to 70%, reduction in chemical. Well, that's awesome. You're looking at the way it is now. You start looking at that Gen 4 technology that's coming down the line. Not only is it looking at, I'm guessing here, but I'm sure it's looking at the size of the plant, what kind of plant it is, what time of year it is, how much moisture is in. There's all these things that's taken into consideration, and it knows exactly to the drop how much herbicide to put down at that one particular spot. Now, if you're the guy that's got Gen 4, and this guy over here is just now getting Gen 1, and he's cut his spraying operation by 50 or 70% or whatever the number is, awesome, great. The Gen 4 guys cut Gen 1 guys' amount of chemical he's spraying by 70%. So now you got this guy over here that was spraying 100,000 gallons of chemical a year or whatever the number is, just for easy math, right? So now he's spraying 30,000 gallons. This guy over here is spraying 70% of his 30. You know what I mean? So now you start looking at economies of scale and how those things all play in there. And even if all your ground's paid for and it's 100% thing, now you're still going to have a hard time competing in the marketplace because this guy's operation is now 70% more efficient than yours. Those kind of things start coming into play with all this technology. And you look at planter technology that's coming down the path of multiple hybrids being on the same machine and all this kind. Those are the kind of things that are a game changer when you start looking at used equipment and what's sitting on the lot. Because at that point, I don't need to trade till there's a better. I mean, it drives itself. It does all the things it needs to do. My trade cycle now is it might be every 2 years when it was every year. It also might be every 6 months because that's how fast things are evolving and the next best things out there. And there's a better mousetrap. And I'm now spraying across my 20,000 acres with 99% less of whatever it was that I was doing, whatever it was with, those things like you can't, that's the crystal ball of technology that you can't see right now. My previous statement was based on today's trends and what we see happen right now. And if everything stayed the same, it's kind of what it looked like. If you extrapolate that all out and you start taking in all these variabilities, used inventory might not even be a thing to worry about because you don't. Once the guy's done with it, no one's buying it.
So that's where I disagree. So we got talking on all this new cool technology that'll come down, increase. Farmers will get larger, right? And I think the core of it is equipment will always be a super important aspect, whether it's small or big, whether it's diesel powered or electric powered, whatever the case. That some machine is going to have to plant the crop, whatever machine that is. And if you bring it back to used equipment, if you look at historically, the appreciation rate of farmland has always been 2% per year. If you look at it in history, that's where it is. If you look at equipment, it's 4% per year. And then you have years like this year where it's up 10% to more. I'll let you speak on how much more that would be. But those prices are going to stick in an inflationary environment today. So if you look at farmer's balance sheet 10 years ago, it was probably made up of between land and equipment. 75% of the balance of a farmer's balance sheet was land, 25% was equipment. Today, as we work with a lot of the our software is used by a lot of the big banks in agriculture, that balance sheet now looks like it's more 50-50 farmland to equipment. So as the equipment continues to get more expensive, our view in the market is you have a lot more risk to manage. As the combine approaches $1 million sometime down in the future, you have that much more risk to manage what that asset value is and when you should be buying and when you should be selling. So when it becomes used, somebody's going to want to buy it. There'll always be a used market, but the gap between new and used can continue to be large.
I think as things become more autonomous and they get to be more of just a widget, and if I have a farm operation, I'm not worried about. I need an experienced operator. Like I've always had to go out and do these things. I don't have to worry about that anymore. I start looking at equipment as just I might not. I mean, I don't think a mini farm. I don't think they're going to own it. I think it's going to be more, like the co-op or the ASPs or whomever that is. The quote unquote machinery links of the world are going to revitalize themselves and come back in and be like, now I'm not hauling a 35,000 pound combine all over the place. I've got a 150 horsepower size machine that I'm going to stick out there, and it's going to go. I got 10 of them in the field. They're going to go plant it real fast. And boom, I'm done. Moving on to the next one. And I just don't see too many people owning that stuff when it becomes fully autonomous because they don't. Again, economy of scale. You know what I mean?
So you're saying so when you drive around town, you see all these lawn and landscaping businesses and everybody affords a lawnmower and goes and mows your yard. Now we're going to see a bunch of fleets of tractors out there. I think today we call it custom farming. And I think what they're trying to coin it later in life is
farming.
Farming. But I think they're calling it farming as a service.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think about like the autonomous vehicles. Let's talk about all cars for a minute here, like autonomous cars. if I could just have an app on my phone where I hit the button and the car shows up, I don't really care if it's my car or somebody else's car. I just need a car. I don't know that I don't know that I own a car when that happens. You just hit the button and it shows up, and it costs me the same whether it's mine or somebody else's. At that point, why do you need it? And I think that's the same thing in farming.
It could be. I think it's going to be pretty hard to break farmers' just love and passion for equipment.
I think you're right, but you're talking about a new generation that's coming in that don't have the same attachment to, this is mom's tractor, this is dad's tractor, that's grandpa's tractor, those kind of things. They'll still have, dad's first tractor in the garage, in the shed sitting back there, but and they'll get it out for parade day and drive their 8R 370 down, 30 years from
a
now.
Local parade.
And in the local parade. But I think there's going to be it's a wide open thing that I think is going to be so unrecognizable in 10 years that we won't. You and I will be talking about this, and remember when people used to own their own equipment. I think we're going to be close to that.
So what is going to happen in the used market then?
Well, that's just it. I mean, I think then you start looking at these developing nations around the world. You start taking a look at a lot of this stuff going over, like in Africa, especially. I think that's where you start seeing these big movements in used equipment. Like in the U.S., there's a big movement of equipment from the north to the south, right? And even more so, there's a lot of row crop tractors that come out of the south and move up to the north. But that migration of equipment, is basically a 4 or 5 state move in each one of these things, and you're in a different one. I think what happens in the U.S. and Canada, you're going to start seeing that equipment hit a certain lifespan in the North American continent. It's going to go to Africa, and when it gets to Africa, it's going to be 10 or 15 years old, and it's going to be doing their demand for things are going to be a little bit different because of the soil contents and what they're growing, and the need or their lack thereof of fertilizer and those kind of things, because of the nutrients that are in the ground already, because it's recently ripped up soil and blah, 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 all those kind of things that come into play. As that migration of equipment goes to Africa, Eastern Europe, Asia, where more of these developing countries are, that's where that stuff's going to end up, and it's going to further transform the landscape of farming, because the U.S. might not be the most dominant agricultural country on the planet anymore. It might be Zimbabwe, you know what I mean? Yeah. Or someplace like that. But there's a lot of things that go into that thing. But infrastructure obviously is a big part of that. But that's how I see it happen. It's like that flow of equipment was just going to go over there, and they're going to use it up till it dies. And it's just like Mexico 10 years ago when I first started this business, they needed a combine or a tractor that was 15-year-old combines, 30, 40-year-old tractors. They might take a 15-year-old planter or something like that, and that's kind of where the market is. That's transitioned now where they're looking at 3, 4, 5-year-old combines, 2, 3, 4-year-old tractor. I mean, that's a way more prevalent vintage of tractor than what it was even 5 years ago. So now we're starting to see what you send all your old stuff to Mexico. Well, not anymore. You keep going south with it. You get to like Central America, Northern South America, and then you're starting to see that equipment show up down there. So, and even to that point, that newer equipment starting to get down there too, because of all the money pouring into Brazil and Argentina and Bolivia and all those places down there. You're seeing more and more, more and more of that technology's getting there, but they still have infrastructure issues they got to overcome.
Yeah, and I think part of that, what's going to help the industry or the world get there is more data and more information around the used piece of machinery. If you look at 10 years ago, where internet was sort of a thing, but I think people still looked at tractors and newspapers and magazines a lot. Okay, let's call it 15 years ago. You always bought from the local dealer, and you had the chance to go down there, kick the tires, maybe look at it more in person. And Now with the power of simply photos and bidding online, like COVID totally made our equipment world go online. And it forced people who are unwilling to look at equipment online or do deals over the internet. It forced them to, because that's how they had to. So I guess what I'm getting at is, you look at the power of the internet and the data that we can now collect around machines that'll help people understand, is it a good piece? Is it a bad piece? What's the service history like? And start to make a better decision from 1,000 miles away versus having to go look at it. Are you guys, I know from the auction side, we're seeing a ton of sight unseen. I was talking with one of our biggest auctioneers, and he told me 50% of machinery at their consignment sales are shipped. A truck and trailer is brought in, and that piece of equipment is loaded on and shipped out of there. It's not driven home. That small 8-foot disc isn't towed behind a Duramax home anymore. It's like it's going around the world.
Yeah, I know. Obviously, the local buyers still coming in and want to see stuff and want to touch it and feel it and those kind of things. But the amount of stuff being bought and sold on the internet, the amount of stuff that is being sight unseen sold, I bet that's got to be at any dealership. I got to believe that's 25% or better of the equipment that's going away, that no one ever sees, or they don't see it till they get it.
Yep.
It could be in China, or it could be in Garden City, Kansas. Who knows where that's at?
Garden City, Kansas.
It could be anywhere in there. So it's definitely it's a different approach to what we're doing now, for sure.
Okay, so that's all pretty future. So we can only control what's going to happen in 2022. What do you think that we'll see in the first quarter of 2022? Do you think this demand will slide off now that people are having to make purchases before the end of the year? I've been hearing a lot of people making as many input purchases as they could because net farm incomes to be higher this year than next. Will that drive prices lower, or with the?
I don't think so. There's not going to be, the demand still going to be the same, or the supply is still going to be the same. The first quarter of my opinion, as far as I can see, I don't see much of anything different in that first quarter. Second quarter, third quarter, I think you might start seeing a little bit of relief. I think you'll see more relief in the fourth quarter too. But there again, there's a lot of equipment out there that's waiting for the new piece to show up, so the next 4 pieces can be sold. And I think that the first time it happens, it's going to pretty much gobble up everything. The second time is going to be the same way. When you get to that third lift, the third tranche of equipment that comes through, that's when you're going to start to see things have some level of normalcy in it. Because I think by the time the third lift of tractors come through and combines and those kind of things come through, I'm not talking like 3 years from now. I'm talking like 18 months from now. Supply, I would hope by then, supply has kind of caught up out of the factory, and it's starting to kind of catch up with demand too. And you're going to start seeing that 24, 25 time frame, to be way more normal than what we describe as normal anyway. So I don't think, I'm not saying that 22 is going to be significantly better than 21, but it's going to be somewhat better than 21.
From an inventory standpoint.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think as more people price new equipment, they're going to realize how much more that they are willing to pay more for a used piece than want to go buy the new machine because of those wait times. So we at Tractor Zoom do not anticipate prices coming down in the foreseeable future, and inventory will continue to be an issue. We have a data point. We call it asset accumulation. So throughout 2021, there were, and naturally you can kind of see this from the supply issues at dealers and even at auctions. What has happened is happened from the asset accumulation stage is people have been buying a second machine versus trading it in, so that they, in case of a breakdown, they know they can't, if they think they can't get parts, that they're starting to hoard more. They have net farm income to have more equipment than they necessarily need. and we don't foresee them, surging the market, throwing all their used pieces back on the market at any certain time. But that's going to continue to allow for additional expansion and soak up more acres when more folks retire the next couple of years.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt about it. And I agree with that 100%. So, well, Kyle, I think that's probably a good place to jump off. We covered a lot of ground on this one. So, as usual, when you're on here. So, if folks want to reach out to you and the folks at Tractor Zoom to see what you guys are doing over there, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, go check out the all-new Tractor Zoom website, tractorzoom.com. You can now look at auction inventory, farm equipment from over 500 auctioneers, auction companies across the entire United States. And here's of 3 months ago, we just started adding dealer inventory. So now you can go see the inventory of more than 900 dealer stores on Tractor Zoom. So go look at all of the equipment coming up for sale or at dealer lots at tractorzoom.com.
Right on. That's a big thing too. Now you have a place of you have two unbiased sources of information. You have the auction data plus the retail data, and you can look at those two things and see how they correlate. So commend you guys for what you're doing over there.
And we've got some super innovative things launching here in the first quarter. I better not launch them here on the podcast, but we can hop on the podcast and discuss them at that time. I think our marketing department might not like me for breaking that seal open. So you'll continue to see us using data to help people make better decisions and have some exciting products coming out here in the first part of next year, which is only like 8 days away. So we better get cranking.
You're getting close. So anyway, well, Kyle, appreciate you being on the podcast, man. Happy New Year. Merry Christmas to you and your family and all the people there at Tractor Zoom.
You as well. Thanks.
All right, man. I'm Casey Seymour with Moving Iron Podcast. Make sure you check me out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. That's where you find the latest edition of the Moving Iron Podcast. Also, go to MovingIronLLC.com for all the latest doings with Moving Iron. So with that, I'm Casey Seymour with Kyle McMahon. Let's go move some iron, folks. Out.
You want to have a meaningful competitive advantage to help sell more equipment. Whether you represent the sales, parts, or management department of an implement dealership, there's a surprising amount of complexity when it comes to tire, wheel, and track technology. Let Axon worry about that so you can get back to supporting your customers. Axon has leveraged years of experience to create a streamlined process that gives you a proven path to help today's grower and sell more equipment. The roots of their organization go back almost 100 years to the invention of the rubber tractor tire. Supporting agriculture is the number one driver of Axon from product development through sales and service. To find more or become an Axon dealer, head over to axontire.com. This podcast is also brought to you by Valley Transportation. Valley has over 33 years in the trucking business, moving ag and construction equipment across the country. For more information, go to valleytransinc.com or give Parker a call at 800-657-4910. At Valley Transportation, our goal is to help you reach yours.
Moving higher in the 21st century. Hard-working people working hard for you and me. Moving higher, time and time again. Through the years you'll find us here. Moving